Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we're gonna talk about the strengths and weaknesses of Cattleya orchids. No orchid is quote-unquote perfect, even though they're all very perfect, aren't they? But when it comes to cultivation, at least, some of their features we may consider strengths, others not so much strengths, but rather we need to be more careful with those things. So that's exactly what I'm going to tell you about today regarding Cattleya orchids, which are some of my absolute favorite orchids. Bonus, at the end of the video, I will tell you my absolute favorite feature of Cattleyas and why I collect so many of them. You'll find in the description a very beginner-friendly tutorial on Cattleyas which talks about what they require, so you will make a better idea if these guys are for you and your environment. Today, we're not talking about care and care requirements, but rather what are their strong suits and what are their weaknesses. So before we start, don't forget to give this video a like if you end up enjoying it. Why not subscribe? I post multiple times a week and it's free. But if you're feeling extra about it, consider further supporting my channel by using the affiliate links down below, checking out our merch, becoming a member, or using the super thanks option down below my video. Righty then, let us start. I have a list. I always have lists. Because if I don't, I completely forget what I want to tell you guys. Right, let's start with strengths. The number one strength of Cattleya orchids, in my opinion, is their drought tolerance. Of all of my orchids, I do believe Cattleyas are champions. And it kind of makes sense. The ancestors of most of the hybrids we grow are coming from very drought-prone areas of the world. So they did develop all sorts of structures and means to cope with this drought. From a thick cuticle on the leaves, to conserving energy by regulating how they photosynthesize, and ending with these pseudobulbs, which are structures that not only retain nutrients but also water. They are fully adapted to withstand drought. There are only a few other orchids that I know of which are just as drought tolerant, and those are the Dendrobium Phalaenopsis. Other than that, I do not believe I have a more drought tolerant orchid, not even the beautiful Vanda. This makes them extremely versatile. If you watch other creators, other people on forums or blogs or whatever, you will see that all of us have a different setup. For Cattleyas in particular, for other orchids too, but some of us will grow our Cattleyas on a mount, some in clay pots, some on pieces of wood, some in plastic pots, some in bark, some in moss. I grow them in moss. You will find a myriad of variations of their setup, and this is because they are incredibly versatile. So choosing the setup will be based more on your environment than their needs. Since they're so drought tolerant, I don't need to take care that I give them a very water retentive medium. I do very well with Cattleyas in a mixture of bark, and I could do well in solely bark as well if I had the time to water them. They would love it. They also did well in leca when I grew them in leca. The problem is me and my availability to water. Them, oh, they don't care. Put them on a slab and try to water them once a day and pretty much they should be happy. Are you gonna be happy? I don't know, that's up to you, but they will be okay. So this drought tolerance that was passed on to the hybrids by their ancestors makes them, in my opinion, the number one choice for those of us who don't have time or have very, very hot and dry environments. They're better than the phals, really, when it comes to drought tolerance. And that's my number one strength for Cattleya orchids. But wait, there's more. Strength number two. Heat tolerance. Oh yes, usually the places around the world where you need to be drought tolerant are also very hot. Well, Cattleyas are the orchids which for me ship the best. I can be in the middle of summer and I can have a shipment delayed by 3 weeks up to a month. The Cattleyas will be okay. Not only will they not care that they didn't receive water, but also they will not care that it kind of cooked on transport. Well, when I say cook, I don't mean boiling point, but still, I've had these guys outside even in 45 degrees Celsius. They did not care. I would not try to throw at them more than 50 degrees Celsius, really, but in common sense terms, that's a lot of heat tolerance. And again, this makes them very, very, very versatile. You can grow them in any type of home. They will do good in more moderate temperatures as well. If you don't like things very hot, that's okay. They can do good in 20 degrees Celsius, 22 degrees Celsius as well if you give them enough light. they shouldn't really fuzz. But if you want to grow orchids outside, these are the orchids for you. Mind you, protect them from sun because sun will boil the leaves. The vast majority of my hybrids, I don't have issues with the temperature, and I do try to keep things pretty warm for them all year round. So again, versatility +2. Next strength, the leaves. The leaves are very strong. Again, generally across the board. Yes, there will be some varieties which have stronger leaves than others, but for the vast majority of them, the feature is the same. They have a very thick cuticle, again, due to the adaptation to their environment, which is rather harsh. They need to conserve water, but together with this thick cuticle, which is meant to keep water inside, come other benefits as well, such as pest resistance. Oh yes, out of all of the orchids in my collection, the Cattleyas are the least affected by pests leaf-wise. I'm gonna get to other structures, but leaf-wise, they are some of the strongest orchids that I have. Mind you, I have quite a bit of variety, so the pests will choose the stuff they like the most. If you only have Cattleyas in your collection, they will go to the Cattleyas as well, but they are not magnets in my opinion. If they have a different choice, be it even another plant, not even an orchid, they will go there, they will leave the Cattleyas alone. It's quite hard to graze upon the leaves, but it's not impossible. There are some pests which are okay with Cattleyas, such as, what's their name? Scale. Scales don't really have much of a problem, but other things such as thrips and spider mites, they really don't prefer Cattleyas. They would much rather munch on something else. Which, when you're dealing with a lot of orchids and no time to deal with the pests, it's a good thing to have. So, the strong leaves are the number 3 strength on my list. I don't have many. I'll keep this short and sweet as much as possible. And the 4th super strong feature is more for the hybrids, but some species too, they are quite resilient. What do I mean by this? Say you manage to kill off all of the roots on your orchid. Which one will be more resilient? An Oncidium or a Cattleya? I'll give you the answer, the Cattleya. It will be more prone to produce new roots and make a complete comeback than many Oncidiums. Again, mind you, there are exceptions, and we'll get to weaknesses when it comes to roots. Don't you worry, don't type just yet. Yes, I know, but remember I said it's mostly with the hybrids. There is a thing we usually talk about in the hobby, which is hybrid vigor. Well, that refers to the resilience of these hybrids to come back to life from a very stressful situation, be it loss of roots, loss of pseudobulbs, loss of leaves, and so on and so forth. It kind of makes sense. They're so well adapted to drought and all of the other things that they do typically bounce back readily. It doesn't mean they have strong roots. No. It just means that most of the times, and particularly with the complex hybrids, you will have great chances to recuperate and rejuvenate an orchid which is sick. Speaking about rejuvenation, I'll link it down below to my ICU setups that I like to use for very, very sick orchids. Those ICUs work wonders for Cattleyas. I really don't have many casualties at all when it comes to Cattleyas in comparison to other orchids, and given enough time, they will root, they will produce new growth, and you can save a Cattleya much easier than you could save, again, I'll come back to Oncidiums, but not only, other species as well. Even Phalaenopsis. Phalaenopsis have a major soft spot with their crown. These guys don't have that soft spot, and that makes them a lot easier to recuperate in my opinion. Now I'll cheat, I'll give you another strength, but this applies to all sympodial orchids, not only Cattleyas. And if you don't know what sympodials are, they're everything that is not a Phalaenopsis or a Vanda, or orchids that have a central stem and then they grow leaves on the sides, and they always grow taller and taller. Sympodials are the orchids which grow from a horizontal rhizome, and from that rhizome, structures that are pseudobulbs or canes or whatever you want to call them, they develop, they bloom, they make leaves and roots, but they are all connected through that rhizome. So the number 1 strength of all sympodials is that if something happens to one of the growths, it's okay. We can eliminate that growth, even rotting. We can eliminate it, and another growth will appear from somewhere on the rhizome, somewhere on the older pseudobulbs. So again, this makes all, or maybe the vast majority of sympodial orchids, it makes them easier to save and rejuvenate, and Cattleyas are no different. Righty. Let's get to the good stuff, the sensitive parts, because we have some, don't worry. All right, weakness number 1, the roots. Cattleyas are the orchids with the most sensitive roots in my collection. Maybe Phalaenopsis are up there and Nellielars, also maybe Bulbophyllums are on the same level, but Cattleyas, if there is a weakness these orchids do possess, is the inability to adapt all their roots to new setups. I shall give you just one instance. I want to repot this orchid. I'm going to remove the medium that is old and broken. I'm going to cut away the roots that are not alive anymore, and I'm going to leave everything that I see healthy. In 1 month, if I pull out that Cattleya from the new pot, even though I did a very good and very safe repotting, I will most likely cut another half of the roots, simply because the older roots did not want to adapt to the new environment. Say you graze a little bit of root, say you snap it, say you do something that is not really all that bad, but still it's a little bruise there. Oh, they will not like it, not at all. And if you have a very pot-bound orchid, you can rest assured the vast majority of those roots will not transition over to a new medium or a pot. It is how it is. Most of the roots will die off within the first month. So, as I say in my tutorial with Cattleyas, it is always a great idea to try and wait until you see new roots growing. Don't wait for new growths to appear, because the roots might not appear when the new growth appears as well. No, when you see those little tiny root tips, that's when you should repot a Cattleya. Cattleyas are the only orchids that, in my experience, do this. If they so desire, if they don't like something about your repotting, they will just shed all of their roots. You might be left with one, you might have a lot of setback. Some will respond better than others. There are exceptions here and there, but if I am to make like a sort of statistics in my 400 orchids, Cattleyas, I'm not playing with the root system of them, because I know it's going to end bad. Weakness number 2, a very slow growth pattern. Usually hybrids, they have that hybrid vigor, and usually they are crossed with faster growing Cattleyas. The hybrids can be very complex. They can have epidendrums in their parentage or other more resilient, more robust, or even faster growing orchids. But the true species, which have a very, very distinct pattern of growth, oh boy, they are slow. They will generally produce 1 pseudobulb per year per direction of growth. 1 pseudobulb is all you get, and together with that 1 pseudobulb, you get 1 new set of roots, and that's all you get for the year. And if you're lucky, 1 set of blooms, and again, that's all you get, no more. We're not necessarily very concerned with flowers in today's video, but I'm just saying, they are slow, and if you have a seedling, good luck with the wait. You're looking at a few years ahead of you until you get a mature enough orchid. I have seedlings that I have for 5 years at this point. They're on the verge of maturity, finally. I really hope I don't set them back by anything, because I'm gonna have to wait another couple of years or so. It's a journey, I'm not gonna lie. But I know some of you have patience. However, when it comes to that setback thing that I told you, if you mess up the root system at the wrong time, they will just refuse to create roots. And that is a major, major drawback with many species. Reason why I don't actually have many species of the sorts. I have a few that I really care about. The seedlings that I had, the Drought, but I don't really go for species. I tend to go for hybrids. I tend to go for Brassivola hybrids, which have constant growth, which are resilient. Yes, I'm gonna mess up the root system, but I know in 2 months I have another root system on the way. I cannot say the same thing about a Drought. Oh, if I mess up the Drought, it's bad. So that is weakness number 2. And weakness number 3, which is the last one that I put here in my list, and this is a bit of a stretch, but hey, it's a weakness. Their sheaths, including the flower sheath and the pseudobulb sheath, they are very weak and prone to pests. And I'm gonna give you some close-ups just to show you what I mean. So I was saying the leaves are pretty robust, they don't attract pests, but when the new growth forms, it is covered in a very thin type of leaf. We call it a sheath. Also, buds on some of these orchids are surrounded by a thin type of leaf called a sheath. Well, this sheath doesn't really have much of a cuticle. It has a very thin one, so pests can munch right through it. And as much as I do not have pest issues with Cattleyas, when one of them is growing a new growth, I can always see some thrips on that sheath. It does not attack the leaf necessarily, but the sheath, it kind of decimates it. And I have to be very careful with treating new growths because they can be very affected if I overdo it with the sprays, with the water, with the oil, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it might not necessarily be a big drawback compared to other orchids, but I do consider that sheath so thin and sensitive that it is a magnet, and I would always take care. If you know you have a pest outbreak in your grow room, check the Cattleya sheaths, the flower sheaths and the new growth sheaths. I assure you they will have something, spider mites, thrips, whatever. They do love that part of it. So that has been, let's say, the last drawback or sensitivity of Cattleyas per se, but I have a little bit of a cheat. I'm gonna give you the biggest sensitivity of, again, sympodials, which Cattleyas are. So they cannot get crown rot because they don't necessarily have a crown. They have the top of the pseudobulb. What they do have that is similar to a crown is a new growth. When that new growth reaches the size where the leaf just starts to split, then it is most prone to rotting. So if you manage to spray it or put some water in there and that water gets trapped and it doesn't evaporate due to the lack of wind and fresh air in our living rooms, you can have a rotting new growth. This definitely happens to Cattleyas, but they're not the only ones. Oncidiums have it happening, even dendrobiums, everything that creates new growth in a similar fashion to Cattleyas, they all have the sensitivity, so you need to be very careful not to drop any water in there. Treat it like a crown. Once the growth is completely mature and you have the leaves, you can have a sheath or not at the top, then it's no problem. There's no funnel here, there is just a dead end, so water doesn't really pool all that much here. It just drops or it evaporates pretty fast. So a mature growth is not prone to rotting, but a fresh one, oh boy, I would be very careful. So that's just something for you to know about all sympodials, including Cattleyas. Now, I promised you sort of a wild card. I'll tell you what my favorite feature about Cattleyas is and why I mostly grow them. Leaving aside the fact that they're so tolerant and they go together with my environment, my most preferred feature is the scent. Oh yes, Cattleyas are the orchids with, in my opinion, in my experience, the most varieties or hybrids that are scented. And not only they have fragrance, but they have beautiful, beautiful fragrance. Some of my favorite fragrances in the entire orchid world happen to belong to Cattleyas. Brassavolas most specifically, which tend to smell at nighttime rather than the daytime. But those big fluffy Cattleyas, those have scents as well. And of course the flowers, they have absolutely gorgeous flowers in all colors, minus a few that are just not very common in the orchid world, but they do have a rainbow of colors and patterns and even shapes. The fragrance though is just something I always look forward to, and no matter how many Cattleyas I have, I do not mind because they're just so different between them, or even if they're a little bit similar to each other, they tend to have other fragrances, little nuances that I'm sensitive to, but sensitive in the good way. I like fragrance and I can detect the little nuances. I cannot really explain it very well, but I do detect the differences, and it just makes my day whenever I have a fragrant orchid and a fragrant Cattleya in bloom. I'm just happy. I'm so happy, and that's why I collect Cattleyas, and they are maybe my new favorite orchid. Used to be Oncidiums, but in this climate, maybe not. So the ease of care for me in this climate, coupled with the scent and the beautiful flowers, makes them my favorite orchid, and my most favorite thing about them is the scent. So I hope this was a good advertisement for Cattleyas. If you've never tried them, I think you should. You don't necessarily need to live in the desert, such as me, to have a Cattleya. They do enjoy warmth rather than cold, but in normal home conditions, I think they are perfect for Cattleyas. They don't need a lot of humidity. They're so drought tolerant that really do not need to do anything special for them other than mind the roots, give them a good substrate, use good materials in general, put them in a nice bright place, and yeah, pretty much follow my care tutorial. Many people ask me, how do I manage to get these flowers and this growth for my Cattleyas? Well, by following exactly what I tell you to do in my tutorials. I don't do anything different than what I tell you to do. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know down below in the comment section if you have any other things about Cattleyas that I didn't mention, what you dislike or what you like. Maybe it's not an issue for me, but maybe it is for you. So the more people know about these things, the better. So yeah, I'm looking forward to your comments, and let me know if you like this format. I can do these videos for a few other orchid types as well. Anyway, with that said, let us end it here. Before I let you go, if you want to visit my second channel for some aquarium videos, check it down below. It's always linked in the description. But for orchid tutorials, subscribe to this channel. And with that said, I'll see you next time. Bye. Does this retainer give me a lisp? I feel like it does. More than the aligners do. I finished Invisalign finally, but I have a retainer now and I feel like it's so bulky in comparison. I have a lisp. Note to self, film without it.